Ivanka Trump launched a personal attack on Jasmine Crockett, insulting her family, questioning her values, and striking at her integrity. Then Donald Trump joined in, telling Jasmine, "Go back to your country. We don't need you." But Jasmine didn't bend. With one bold question about Barron Trump, she turned their attacks back on them. The result? Trump and Ivanka left the set before the show was even over. The stage was glowing under the studio lights. Cameras were in place, the audience hushed, and the live broadcast had just begun. Everyone expected a tense discussion, but no one could have predicted the storm that was about to unfold. The host started by framing the night around the most pressing struggles of everyday Americans. He spoke about families working 2 or 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. He mentioned people drowning in medical bills, unable to afford the health care they desperately needed. And he didn't shy away from the truth. America's political climate was complicated, divided, and full of anger. This was supposed to be the heart of the conversation, ordinary people and their pain. But the second Donald Trump leaned into the microphone, the mood began to shift. His presence filled the stage like thunder rolling in. His voice carried that familiar edge, strong, forceful, and designed to grab attention. Trump began laying down his vision of the nation. He spoke with absolute certainty, brushing aside the problems the host mentioned as though only he had the solutions. He described a country under siege, full of threats, and insisted that he alone could hold it together. Each sentence came out like a hammer, heavy and final. The audience sat in silence. Some were leaning forward, nodding, while others looked uneasy. You could feel the tension rising in the air. This wasn't going to be a calm conversation. This was going to be a battle. Then Ivanka Trump stepped in. Polished, composed, her voice softer than her father's but no less pointed. At first it seemed she would continue the same talking points. But almost immediately she changed direction, her eyes fixed on Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Ivanka's words weren't about policies or the economy. They were aimed straight at Jasmine, personal, sharp, and meant to cut. She accused Jasmine of lacking integrity. She questioned her values, and then she went even further, dragging Jasmine's family into the conversation. The audience reacted with murmurs. This wasn't debate anymore, it was attack. The kind of attack that isn't about ideas, but about tearing a person down. Jasmine sat quietly, her expression calm, but you could see the weight of the insult. Millions of people were watching, waiting to see how she would react. And then, Donald made everything worse. He leaned forward, his voice booming over the studio. His words cold and deliberate. "Go back to your country. We don't need you." The sentence dropped like a bomb. The air froze. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. The audience gasped. Some shook their heads, others sat in stunned silence. It was a line that didn't just attack Jasmine. It attacked her very place in America. The host looked caught between shock and fear, unsure if he should step in. But the damage had been done. The insult hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. For Jasmine Crockett, this was a moment of truth. Many expected her to falter, to shrink under the weight of such open hostility. After all, she was facing the sitting president and his powerful daughter, both using their full force against her on live television. But Jasmine didn't move. She didn't lower her eyes. She sat still, calm and composed. The silence after Trump's words was long, heavy, and unbearable for everyone else. But for her, it was strength. The audience didn't know it yet, but Jasmine was preparing her answer. An answer that would not only flip the conversation, but shake the Trump family in a way no one had ever done before, because in just a few moments, she would unleash a statement so shocking, so unexpected, that it would be remembered as the Barron Bombshell. But for now, the stage was set. A nation's struggles had been turned into personal attacks. A president had chosen insult over leadership, and Jasmine Crockett, calm in the eye of the storm, was waiting for her chance to strike back. The tension was unbearable. The audience leaned forward. Viewers at home held their breath. The showdown had only just begun, but already, the lines were drawn. And as the camera zoomed in on Jasmine's steady expression, you could feel it. Something extraordinary was about to happen. The studio was still vibrating from Donald Trump's harsh command, "Go back to your country. We don't need you." The audience sat frozen, their eyes darting between Donald, Ivanka, and Jasmine Crockett. The camera zoomed in, searching for her reaction. Was this the moment she would break? Would she shrink under the weight of the insult? But Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She sat steady, shoulders squared, eyes calm. The silence that followed was long and heavy, and it began to work in her favor. Donald and Ivanka had thrown everything at her, insults, attacks, and dismissals. And yet here she was, unshaken. It was clear she was waiting for the perfect moment. Then, with the eyes of the nation locked on her, Jasmine leaned ever so slightly toward the microphone. Her voice came out calm but razor sharp. She turned her gaze directly to Ivanka and said the words that would send shockwaves across America. "Why don't you tell us about Barron?" The Barron Bombshell, the room gasped. A ripple of shock moved through the audience like a wave. The host's jaw fell open. Even the camera operators, who had seen countless political clashes, looked shaken. For the first time that night, the Trump family looked cornered. Ivanka's polished mask cracked. Her lips tightened, her eyes flickered. She had not expected this. Donald, usually quick to thunder back, shifted in his chair and glanced at his daughter, as if searching for an answer himself. But no answer came. Jasmine had gone directly to the heart of what they wanted to keep hidden. The contradictions, the questions, the silence around Barron. It wasn't just a personal jab. It was something deeper. It was about transparency, about a family that demanded control over the nation's story, but refused to face its own. Ivanka tried to form words. She began with vague sentences, dodging, evading, circling around the point. But every time she avoided the question, Jasmine's position grew stronger, because silence speaks louder than words. The audience could see it. The Trumps were rattled. Their usual confidence, their ability to flip any conversation in their favor, was slipping away. Jasmine sat firm, her voice steady as she pressed again. "The people deserve answers. They deserve honesty. You can't keep hiding behind walls of denial while you sit here and attack me." Her tone wasn't angry. It was controlled, precise. And that calmness made her words cut even deeper. Ivanka's face tightened. Donald shifted again, visibly uncomfortable. His jaw clenched. He looked ready to explode, but even he seemed unsure of what to say. The bombshell had shaken them both, and now the cracks in their armor were showing for everyone to see. The studio air grew heavy. You could almost hear hearts pounding. Viewers at home, the live audience, even the host who struggled to keep the conversation moving. Everyone knew they were witnessing a moment that would not be forgotten. For years, Barron had been shielded from political crossfire. He was the one Trump child kept away from the spotlight. But now Jasmine had forced the family to confront a truth they didn't want to face. Even silence has consequences. Even the walls they built around their secrets could be broken. The Barron Bombshell wasn't about a single question. It was about control. Who controls the narrative? Who decides what's off limits when the stakes are this high? And Jasmine had just proved that she wouldn't play by the Trump family's rules. The cameras cut between Ivanka's pale face and Donald's clenched jaw. Neither looked ready with an answer. Their attempts at denial and deflection only made them look weaker. The audience felt it. Viewers at home felt it, and Jasmine knew it too. The power in the room had shifted. A few minutes earlier, Donald and Ivanka had looked unstoppable, an unshakable political machine. Now they looked vulnerable. Their silence, their stumbles, their refusal to respond, it was all on display. And Jasmine Crockett sat tall, her calmness unbroken, her voice steady as she held their gaze. The battle had turned. The audience leaned forward. What would Ivanka say? What would Donald do? Could they find a way back into control, or had Jasmine cornered them for good? The silence stretched, uncomfortable and raw. For the Trump family, it was the longest silence of their lives. And for Jasmine, it was proof that one voice, steady and unafraid, could shake even the most powerful to their core. The Barron Bombshell had landed, and the fallout was only just beginning. The moment hung in the air like a storm about to break. Jasmine Crockett's Barron Bombshell had done what few thought possible. It pierced through the polished image of the Trump family. Ivanka sat stiffly in her chair, her eyes darting between the cameras and her father. She had been trained for these moments. She knew how to keep her tone measured, her words rehearsed. But this wasn't a question she could sweep aside with charm or a businesslike smile. Her lips trembled as she opened her mouth. only to close it again. It was the kind of hesitation that said more than any words ever could. Donald Trump noticed it too. His usual thunderous confidence was slipping. He leaned forward, gripping the edge of the desk with both hands, jaw clenched. The man who once prided himself on always having the last word now seemed silent. The audience could sense it. The viewers at home could sense it. Something wasn't right, and Jasmine knew it. Her calm gaze never wavered. She didn't press with anger. She let the silence itself do the work. Because silence can be louder than shouting. The host tried to step in, fumbling for a question to ease the tension, but it was too late. The cracks were already showing. And then, like a ghost rising from the past, the memory of Trump's own words came flooding back into the public conversation. Words that were never forgotten. Years earlier, on national television, Donald Trump had sat on the couch of The View. He smiled as he spoke about his daughter Ivanka. And what he said shocked the world. If Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her. The audience back then had laughed nervously, unsure if it was a joke or something darker. But the words lingered, staining his public image for years. And he had doubled down at different times, describing Ivanka as beautiful and even voluptuous. These were not the words of a father. These were words that blurred lines, words that unsettled millions. And now, as Ivanka sat trapped under Jasmine's calm stare, those words returned to the surface like poison bubbling up from a well. It was as if Jasmine didn't even need to say them. The memory itself was powerful enough. Ivanka shifted uncomfortably, straightening her posture, forcing a tight smile. But the damage was done. The image of a father who praised his daughter's beauty in ways that felt off. The image of a daughter who seemed forced to sit quietly, carrying the weight of her father's public words. And now, the image of them both unable to answer a question that cut too close to home. The cracks in the armor were widening. Donald finally broke the silence. His voice was sharp, defensive, but weaker than before. This is disgusting. Totally disgusting. You don't talk about family that way. Nobody talks about my daughter that way. But his outrage didn't land the way he hoped, because for years he had been the one putting Ivanka in those situations. He had been the one crossing lines, speaking in ways that left the public unsettled, and Jasmine didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to insult him. She simply tilted her head, her eyes never leaving his, and replied softly, "Then maybe you shouldn't have." The audience gasped. It was a knife twisted without effort. A reminder that Trump's own words, his own history, had built the very trap he was now caught in. Ivanka's face hardened, but it was the hardness of someone holding back tears, not strength. She reached for her water glass, her hand trembling slightly. Donald's face flushed red. He waved his hand toward the host, signaling he was done. He muttered about the show being unfair, about biased questions, about respect. But respect was already gone. The cameras captured it all. The fidgeting, the stiff smiles, the quick glances at the floor. The Trump family, who had once commanded every room they walked into, now looked exposed. And Jasmine? She hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't lost her composure. She had let their own history do the work for her. The cracks in the armor had become fractures, and soon those fractures would split wide open. The Trumps shifted in their seats, desperate to move on, desperate to escape the corner they had been backed into. But the show wasn't over yet, and Jasmine Crockett wasn't finished speaking truth to power. The battle was far from done. The studio felt like it was holding its breath. The bright lights, the humming cameras, the restless energy of the audience, it all pressed down on the moment, amplifying every glance, every movement. Donald Trump's face was flushed, his lips tight with rage. Ivanka's polished image had slipped. Her eyes darted nervously, her smile forced and unsteady. Jasmine Crockett sat calmly in her chair, as if the storm raging across from her couldn't touch her. For the first time all evening, the power dynamic had flipped. The man who prided himself on being the loudest voice in the room was suddenly fighting for control. And the daughter who had once been shielded as his perfect confidant now looked cornered. Her silence more telling than anything she could have said. Donald slammed his palm on the table. The sound echoed across the studio like a gunshot. "This is a setup," he barked. "This whole thing is unfair. Totally unfair." His words were sharp, but they didn't land with the same weight they once had. Because people weren't looking at him with awe anymore. They were watching a man unravel. The host tried to regain control, leaning in with a shaky voice. "Mr. President, maybe we could," but Donald cut him off. "No, enough. I'm not going to sit here and listen to these lies. My daughter doesn't deserve this. She is the most respected, the most accomplished, the most—" And then he stopped. Because as he spoke, Ivanka shifted beside him, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her body language told the whole story. She didn't feel respected in this moment. She felt exposed. Jasmine leaned forward slightly, her voice calm and steady. "You talk about respect, Mr. President, but respect is earned. And tonight the people can see the truth for themselves," the audience murmured. The tension climbed higher, stretching like a rope pulled to its breaking point. Donald's eyes blazed, but his words faltered. He glanced at Ivanka, searching for some sign of composure, some strength to lean on. But she wouldn't look at him. She was staring down at the table as if wishing she could vanish into the polished wood. And then it happened. Donald pushed back his chair, the legs screeching against the floor. The sound made everyone jolt. He stood up, towering, his finger jabbing at the host. "This is over. Done. We don't need this garbage. Come on, Ivanka." Ivanka hesitated for a split second, her eyes flickering toward Jasmine. For just a moment it looked as if she might stay seated, but then with a deep breath she rose slowly to her feet. The cameras followed as they turned away from the table. Donald's shoulders were stiff, his walk quick and heavy. Ivanka trailed just behind him, her posture slumped, her expression unreadable. The audience gasped, then fell into stunned silence. The most powerful man in the country and his daughter, walking off. Abandoning the stage, abandoning the fight. The host stammered, We've lost the president and his daughter." But Jasmine didn't let the moment slip away. She sat perfectly still, then looked straight into the camera. Her voice was soft, almost gentle, but filled with steel. "They can walk away. They can leave before the conversation ends. But the truth doesn't walk out of this room. The truth stays. And the truth is what the people deserve." The words cut through the silence like a knife. The audience erupted, not in applause, not in laughter, but in the kind of stunned energy that comes from knowing you've just witnessed history, because it wasn't just a walk-off. It was a concession. By leaving, Donald and Ivanka had given Jasmine the last word. And in politics, the last word is everything. The cameras lingered on the empty chairs where Donald and Ivanka had been sitting just moments before. Two powerful seats now vacant. Two symbols of authority, now abandoned. Jasmine remained in hers, poised, unshaken, commanding the stage in their absence. The host, still flustered, tried to wrap words around the chaos. But Jasmine's calm presence overshadowed everything else. Everyone watching knew what they had just seen. A shift in power, right before their eyes. And while Donald and Ivanka disappeared backstage, their footsteps echoing down the hallway, Jasmine Crockett sat firmly in her seat. The voice of someone who refused to be silenced. The voice of someone who had faced the storm and stayed standing. The walk-off wasn't just an exit. It was the unraveling of control, and Jasmine had made sure the whole world saw it. The studio was buzzing with disbelief. Donald Trump and Ivanka had stormed off moments ago, their empty chairs now standing like abandoned thrones beneath the glaring lights. The tension that had filled the room was still thick in the air, like smoke after a fire. But in the middle of the chaos sat Jasmine Crockett, calm, steady, and ready. The cameras zoomed in on her face. She didn't rush to speak. She let the silence linger, long enough for everyone watching to lean in, waiting to hear what she would say next. And then, with a quiet confidence, Jasmine began. "They can leave this stage," she said, her voice firm but controlled. "But the issues we face as Americans don't walk out the door. They remain right here with us. Economic struggles, healthcare that families can't afford, a political system that too often serves power before people," the audience murmured. Heads nodded. Her words weren't rehearsed sound bites, they felt raw, real, and honest. She leaned slightly forward, her eyes never leaving the camera. "And tonight you saw something very clear. You saw what happens when leaders choose power and pride over honesty. You saw what happens when difficult questions are met with silence, with anger, or with walking away. That's not leadership. That's running from responsibility." Her voice grew stronger, steady as stone. Mr. Trump talks about respect. He talks about loyalty. But respect is not built on insults and loyalty is not built on fear. Respect is earned by truth. And the truth is that Ivanka Trump has been handed enormous influence in the highest office of this country. Not because of votes, not because of merit, but because of her last name. Gasps rose from the audience. The words hit hard. Jasmine didn't flinch. She continued. When business interests blur with government decisions, when family ties outweigh the voice of the people, we all suffer. Because that's when private deals replace public good. That's when citizens pay the price for someone else's gain. She paused, letting her words hang in the air. The cameras cut to the empty seats again, then back to Jasmine. The symbolism was sharp, power absent, accountability present. For years, Ivanka's business ventures have crossed paths with official U.S. diplomacy. For years, questions have been raised about conflicts of interest that remain unanswered. And tonight, when those questions surfaced again, she had no response. She chose silence. She chose to walk away. The studio went still. But everyday Americans don't get to walk away. Jasmine pressed on. You can't walk away from medical bills piling on your table. You can't walk away from rent that takes half your paycheck. You can't walk away from broken promises made by leaders who swore they were fighting for you. Her words echoed like a drum beat, each line building stronger than the last. So I will say this directly to the American people. You deserve better. You deserve leaders who will face the hard questions, not run from them. You deserve leaders who will tell the truth, not twist it. You deserve leaders who will fight for your family as fiercely as they protect their own. A hush fell over the audience. This was no longer a debate. This was a declaration. Jasmine took a breath, her tone softening, but her message still sharp. Unity doesn't mean silence. Unity doesn't mean we look the other way when powerful people abuse their positions. Unity means we stand together for fairness. It means we hold each other accountable. No matter how rich, no matter how powerful, no matter what last name you carry. Her gaze cut into the camera one final time. And I'll tell you this. Tonight wasn't about me. It wasn't about Donald Trump. It wasn't even about Ivanka. It was about us. The people. The ones who work every day to keep this country going. The ones who deserve a government as honest and hard-working as they are. She leaned back slightly, her hands folding on the desk. Her closing words came soft, almost like a whisper, but they landed with thunder. So I ask you, not as Republicans, not as Democrats, not as labels, but as Americans, what kind of leadership do you want? What kind of future do you want? Because that choice, in the end, belongs to you. The audience sat in silence, heavy with the weight of her words. Jasmine Crockett had stood her ground against the most powerful family in America. She hadn't shouted, she hadn't insulted, she had simply spoken the truth. And as the credits began to roll, one thing was certain. Donald and Ivanka had walked away. But Jasmine's words would remain long after the lights dimmed.